It is now time to talk with T Radar. It's been a wee while because he's been away. Antarctica has been in the one of the coldest parts of the earth, and he's joining us with what I call Scott's beard today. G'day, T Radar.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I've had a bit of a trim of it since I've come back. The old beard. I always had this kind of desire to have ice form on here on my face, so I gave it a bit of a beard. Didn't really have to grow much of a beard. Just really needed to fill in the middle. And then it got a bit out of hand, so I've trimmed it back, and then I start filming a new series, I think, next week, so I imagine the word will come down from on high that the middle must again be removed, because people don't trust a beardy.
Well, yeah, but there's something though. No, because there is something trustworthy about a beard. I disagree because you think about our forefathers. They all had beards, and even though they were only 20, they looked like they were 80 or so. And there was something about mana and trust involved with beards. But did you achieve your goal of getting ice in that beard?
Well, I got a bit of ice on the beard, not as much as I liked. And unfortunately, some of it, I don't think it was sort of ice so much as frozen nose goober, which wasn't really what I was after. But it wasn't quite as cold as I'd imagined it would be. So disappointing, a sort of a lack of ice. What I should have done is got a little spritzer and spritzed the beard, you see, and then ice would have formed on it. But I felt that would be cheating.
Good for a photo op, though. So what were you doing down there, and how did you get down there, and what was it all about?
Good. All right. Went down on with Gareth Morgan's outfit. He'd been down 2 years before actually, and he decided that something needed to be done about the whole sort of knowledge of Antarctica and what was going on down there, and with the various New Zealand sub-Antarctic islands. So he put together a group of people. There were some folk from NIWA, some university lecturers on oceanography and paleogeology and various other bits and pieces, and then photographers and writers and ordinary sort of members of the public who could apply and pay their fee and go onto the ship. So packed them all up and off we went. There was 50 of us. And you kind of think, going to be away for 30 days, there'll be a bit of time to do this and a bit of time to do that. No, lectures. It was like being at university without the ability to stay home. And so we had various lectures, and it was really fascinating, actually, looking at sort of, the state of science. We had a guy from who used to be at MFAT, who was he'd been on the New Zealand delegation to the Antarctic Treaty Council for a decade, who could fill us all in with various bits of people. So, lots of animated discussion about, particularly toothfish was a big one. A lot of people don't want the toothfish taken out of the Ross Sea. So there's, and we had a fishing representative on board we picked up off a fishing boat down there, who stayed there, and yeah, it was fascinating. But probably the most fascinating thing, the jewel in New Zealand's sort of island crown in a way is these sub-Antarctic islands, Campbell, Enderby, the Snares, Bounties, and we got to sort of stop off and have a look at those because they're sort of out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. Yeah,
have you been there, I imagine?
No, not at all. I think very few humans have. Plenty of shipwrecks, right. Of course.
Plenty of shipwrecks, and you think, what an inhospitable piece of rock to be shipwrecked on. Probably the worst one. Where was it? I think it was the Bounty Islands, which literally are tiny rocks in the middle of nowhere, and yet there were some sealers stuck on them for 9 months.
Yeah.
Apparently, when they were rescued, they were mad with dehydration and hunger, because the islands are literally covered in nothing but seabirds. Millions of seabirds, and so you could imagine that any rain or moisture that would fall would be absolutely polluted by bird guano. It would have been salty, and you look at these islands and think, how on earth did anyone consider the fact that you could stay there for that long and whack seals on the head? Quite astounding.
Yeah, because Antarctica and that part of the world now are becoming more under the spotlight with climate change research. So any talk of that on the trip?
Just oodles of it, actually. And looking at, there was a lot of talk on the driver that is the Southern Ocean. You sort of just assume it's there, and you think, it's just water. But we had an oceanographer on who was explaining the sort of the polar the circumpolar current. Because what you don't really think about is there it is down there. It's the only sort of ocean in the world with no landmass in the way. So you get this huge sort of rotation of water round and round the Antarctic continent. Very deep, very cold, and what it does is that water then goes all the way up into the North Atlantic, up into the Pacific, up into the Indian Ocean, and then turns around and brings that warm water back down again and chills it back down, and it's this huge cycle, massive volumes of water.
Yeah.
And it's all going on. You look at the ocean and you don't really think that there's all that much going on, and yet underneath it there's this sort of superhighway of current, which has an enormous amount to do with regulating ocean temperature and the movement of CO2 and all of that kind of thing. And there's a lot of change within that that's heating up. There was a lot of talk of that sort of cold water shifting slightly, and of course what happens then is your water warms up. So there's been a big shift, particularly in Australia. I think it should have shifted down about 350 kilometres. So your winds change and all of that. So if your winds are changing, then you're getting a different rainfall pattern, different wind patterns. And I think we're in a way sort of, I've only got to look at that rainfall yesterday up in Northland to think, hey, it's, it is cyclone season, but these kind of climatic events are happening more and more often. Partia and Taranaki got hammered while we were away. Yeah. We had some of that we had this year, and the drought they've had down in Invercargill. You could attribute those to if you want to a sort of a yearly thing. But when those yearly things are happening year in, year out, you start to think, it all got a bit grim, actually. Yeah.
So they say that these rain events, like the recent Northland one, are normal rain events, but because the Earth is heating up, there is more moisture in the air, so that these normal events become more extraordinary.
That's exactly right. You get this sort of magnification effect, and it's interesting. A lot of discussion as to what's going to happen. With Antarctica. The likes of the ice shelves. They say what's going to happen. The sea doesn't need to warm all that much, and what happens is you melt the bottom of the ice shelf, and then it collapses in. But ironically, at the same time, that may also, if it's warming, you may get more snow. Because you've got the water going up and there's more precipitation, and I suspect the two won't balance each other out. But no, it's all a little bit sort of grim. But the good thing was when we were there, the ice had melted significantly so that we could get into McMurdo Sound up to Scott Base, and I think we were one of the only boats to do that this year. It's a relatively normal kind of thing. The ice does melt there, but when you start to hear the stories of container ships and things like that making their way through the famous Northwest Passage up in the Arctic, that's an absolutely new phenomenon. That's been iced in for as long as people can recall. And, there are people there's always going to be that argument. And, I don't really, if people want to say, it's not humans don't have anything to do with it. Well, you can believe, what you like, but you do have to accept the fact that things are changing. There was a good presentation as well on the insurance industry, looking at them and what the recalculation of risk, and the fact that, there will come a time when significant amounts of particularly beachside property will no longer be insured. Not because anyone believes, that, the sea's going to come up and they'll be underwater, but the sea, may rise enough to mean that when you get those big storm surges and things like that, that will start to create more damage than what it does now. So the whole thing is a complicated mess.
Yeah, so it sounds like an extraordinary and for many people once in a lifetime trip. Do you hope to get back there again?
Yeah, I think I do, actually. I wouldn't mind getting back there again. It does have a hold to you. I'd really love to get back down to the sub-Antarctic islands, down to Campbell and Auckland and Enderby. We got to Macquarie, which the Australians own, saw all the million king penguins standing on the beach. They're these wonderful gems, and there's been a lot of work done down there of getting rid of pests, off them, mice and rats. On Enderby, on Macquarie, they're getting rid of rabbits, and just to see all the fauna come back, and to stand a couple of metres away from albatross. And the good thing was, there's only so many people allowed to go on there every year, and we had a DOC representative who's in control of that area, and he was assessing how much damage people did, and I like the attitude that they have, that if they can get people on and there's not too much damage, and everyone who goes there is essentially going to become a free ambassador for these islands, because they are an incredible place to sort of go and visit. So I'd like to get back down there. Wouldn't like to be marooned. Wouldn't like to winter over in Antarctica.
For sure. Do you get to keep your jumpsuit that you wear on these kinds of trips? Yeah,
I did. I went out and I bought a lovely red one from the Kiwi Disposals in K Road. and along with some woolens. I had an old school kind of look, and so it was kind of nice. I was all snug in my cheap army surplus, and everyone, there's a lot, well, not everyone, but there's a lot of other people. You could see them in their, hundreds of dollars spent on warm puffer jackets and fleecy pants. So I felt oddly smug and warm.
Excellent.
Smug and snug.
Well, it's nice to have you back here on the show, T Radar. Look forward to chatting to you again very soon.
It's good. We'll be back next week. We'll deal with some issues.
Excellent. It's now 20.